Today, inside the vault, Fred and I break down ways to apply this week's virtue as believers, husbands, fathers, and friends. Whoever you are and wherever you are, we're glad you made it. Are you ready? Let's get back to good. Welcome back. We're back to good.
Yes.
I don't know. I'm the one that clicked record. It's not like you caught me in the middle of anything. I just hit it and we're still laughing because that's what we do. It's been a couple weeks. Let me know what's going on in your life, man. Then we'll jump into this new topic. How you been?
I'm good, right? This is that time of year right before summer hits, like end of school year for kids. And so you have all the closeouts and been traveling a bit and actually getting to spend some really good time with family and friends. So it's been good times. Just, it takes energy. It just takes energy and focus. And when you have multiple things happening at the same time, it always kind of drains you a little bit, just a little bit.
Yeah. So before we started clicking record, Fred was telling me, he's like, I got a date night with my wife and Donnie. I was like, I just literally came back. So I got a collared shirt on right now. I just came back from having dinner with Laura, just us. And those girls, you're going out, have a nice romantic dinner with mommy. I said, yeah, I am.
Yes.
Without y'all. Yes.
This is the way it used to be.
I know, but before any of y'all, it's our fault, but whatever.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know why I'm chiding myself here.
Dude. Let that one ride. Let that one ride.
Yeah, but Fred starts singing like just the two of us. So I'm like, yeah, just us. But funny enough, sort of sounds like justice. And that's what we're diving into.
Here we are.
Justice with just us, just the two of us, me and Fred. And no, you're not going to convince me to sing it for you. No, I don't know you like that. Maybe he will. But on this topic of justice, off the cuff, what you got? What's going through your mind on this one before we start unpacking it?
I mean, I think most people think of it as fairness. I think it's more than just what we think about, but it's what we do. And I think in times like these, especially what's happening where I am, more people should be taking action versus just thinking about it or acknowledging it. And I'm talking about in more than just a political sense. I mean, in your families, in your professions, in your relationships. Again, we fairly have a basic understanding of what's right and wrong. I almost stumble with that these days. There used to be, we would say common sense and common values, but I acknowledge that we're not in that same place. There's absolutely a spectrum of what people beliefs are and what's right and what's wrong. But I would just say in general, right? I feel most people know what that is. The question is, how do they take action with it, right? This is not just the thought or the acknowledgement of right and wrong, but how do you put action to it so it doesn't just become what's in your head?
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to cover those three briefly. We don't always take notes, but it's not going to be a long episode. We do both have a hard stop time. We talk because we got families, we got day jobs, we got day lives. We have lives in general. Yeah. But we do need to frame some certain things.
Yeah.
So before we jump into it, I think probably one of the core verses that Fred and I landed on for the name of this series, Back to Good. And then we talked about it, and I've shared this before, but Micah 6:8. And I don't know whatever translation, people might read it differently, but the way I know it and learned it is, he's shown you, O man, what's good. And what does the Lord require of you? To do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. So that verse lays out pretty cleanly for those who are believers in the faith, that if you're going to live this Christian life and follow Jesus and live a life of trying to be a good disciple and a good leader, whatever space you're in, whatever that looks like for you, the very first thing out of the gates for what a man is supposed to be doing that has been outlined by God, his creator, is good. First thing is to do justice. And I love that you said it's so much more than just having head knowledge of maybe loosely what is right or wrong or your opinions on it. But how are you transitioning that into action?
Yeah.
And how are you living justly in every space? I love that you highlighted family, kids, spouses. It's every relation. It's a relational thing because justice comes where people are involved, because people come with tension and people come with conflict. So justice is the outcropping of people in together.
Yeah.
And it's so how do you live justly? Because if there wasn't opposed viewpoints, then it would be balanced. So it is, yeah, it's fairness, but it's such this mindset of a balance, and not a balance based on your bias or preference, but a balance based on truth.
Yeah.
And then you go like, ooh, what's that? And man, we could dive so deep into this because there needs to be a higher calling than just our emotional desires and whims and fancies.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we hope we can start scratching the surface on. But we're probably going to need some of y'all's help. So we'd love for you to jump in the comments, jump in the chats, give us your opinions, where you're struggling, where you're having issues with it, where you're seeing it work well. Because the flip of it, man, I am just seeing a lot of injustice. And I think it's always been out there. It's just more prevalent for people to see, and it's exposed. But like you said, are you sitting back and sort of biting your tongue, or are you just only letting it land for words and lip service towards justice, or are you a man or woman of action?
Yeah.
So for the head, I think for our minds, we'll look at it from maybe a perspective and discernment. I think you transition that, like you said, into your hands or your body, like what action and what accountability for those actions are there?
Yeah.
And then our hearts, like our spirit, what's our conviction and our compassion in this space? Because I really feel like justice isn't just about this idea of retaliation or a judge or someone getting crushed when they're wrong. I think in the true heart of justice, it's about finding harmony and finding restoration and finding wholeness, how it was initially intended to be.
Yes.
Before it got off kilter. So that's a long framework from both of us, I guess, but there's so much we can cover on this, and I'm excited. So I would say perspective, though, because you said moving into actions, but before we act, we both know we're thinking about it and we're kicking it around between our ears. So this topic of justice, what's your perspective on it? I would love to hear that.
I mean, it's in my opinion, it's one of those things again, because we don't have necessarily a common lens of what's right and wrong. So what I typically say to people is, what would you want done to and for you? So if removing any type of spiritual aspect of it, how would you want someone to treat you? How would you want someone to approach you? How would you want someone to talk to you, right? I feel like justice, again, to your point, I love that you brought that out too, right? It's not about just the judgment part, because that is a part of it, and you can't dismiss that. But it is about restoring people to a sense of wholeness and a sense of dignity, per se.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it's starting with how do you even think about other people, which goes into selfishness, which is a whole nother, I guess, trait and characteristic. But if for a second, when you're thinking about a topic or you are seeing someone who is being treated unjustly, I would think about how would I feel in that situation if I was on the receiving end of whatever the thing was, either again, communication, a law, some new rule, some type of class system or segregation or anything that would separate people in a way that you would not want to feel.
Right.
That's to me where you start is how do you think about, what's balanced, what's right, what's wrong. And then from a spiritual perspective, the good thing is we already know what that is. We got this book called the Bible that clearly provides us the framework. And that's the way I like to think of it as, because I think you don't take it literally. Someone's going to shoot me for that, but it is what it is. I think there's framework in the Bible of things of do's and don'ts. And that should be the first lens we look through versus the lens of our personal experience. And oftentimes people use their personal experience to be the first lens that they view things through when it comes down to what's right and wrong. Mm-hmm. So it's for me, it's always, hey, how would I want someone to treat me? But also, what are my spiritual principles?
Right.
What do I know to be right and wrong? Starting there. Mm-hmm. And then from there, it kind of leads into the next part that I think you were starting to talk about. What about you?
Well, before, as you have some people clicking off safe, getting ready to execute you in the back of the head for saying the Bible is just a framework. I know Fred well, and I think we share a lot of the same core beliefs. And he has full honor for God's word and the Bible and scripture. But let me just give you a quick vignette or a quick snippet of an example. Is some of the spaces that I grew up in, very similar to what Fred grew up in, they might take a text of the Bible very literally and not realize that it was written by a human being in a much different culture, in a much different space and time. So when you have no cultural context, and pump your brakes because I'm going somewhere with this. When you have no cultural context for an issue and attention that you are then made aware of, and you immediately think that you can just take a cookie cutter response or a copy paste answer, that's actually things that even Jesus on this earth rebuked spiritual leaders for doing.
Yeah.
And he called them out on that. And I don't personally like to say that Jesus was a rebel because, I mean, even in his word, he said rebellion's like the sin of witchcraft. So I don't think he would like to be called a rebel, but I think he shook it up.
Absolutely.
He definitely was all about having some sort of a revolution and saying, like, I'm not the one that's wrong. This world is the one that's defaulted away from the balance that I created it to have. So he was fully in the right, and people's perspectives were so off base from what he has ordained and established. But when he's on this earth and looking at people trying to take things out of context, trying to take, let's say, the Bible literally, or the scriptures literally, or the Torah literally, or all of these writings literally, and it literally didn't apply in that sense. And he I think he's just looking at him like, why are you being so foolish?
Yeah.
So that's the context I hear when you say that. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. It's not undermining the Bible or scripture that we believe in and read and love. And it's not saying it's not perfect, but it's saying like the way you treat it and use it, or maybe people, the way they abuse it for their own scheming goods in their own mind.
Yes.
It's wrong. That's not what it's intended for. So I think the same way that you should maybe read information, whether it's a theory or a research or a philosopher or the Bible, and try to understand the context of the time it was in and the person who wrote it and their perspectives. That's a lot of just being patient to understand.
Yeah.
And that resonates with me on this mind frame of justice, because I think justice, when you're talking about it from a headspace, requires wisdom, temperance, and courage. And wisdom looks a lot like discernment and trying to discern whether it's culturally or just organizationally or whatever. And you're exactly right. You don't even have to put this in a spiritual context, just people together discerning what is this that I'm stepping into and what is this tension? Because justice has to be served, whether it's merits or punishment, based on actions. Justice is always related to actions that you're seeing. So then your response has to be some sort of action, not just a thought. So it takes some wisdom. It takes temperance, which is some restraint. You're going to have to show some restraint from your own bias and proclivities and desires and be just, be balanced, be measured. And then I think that's why it's used a lot with judges, of course, in the justice system, but it's so much more than that. And then courage. I think the action, it just highlights how much intestinal fortitude do you have? How much do you really believe in the truth that you claim? And how much courage do you have to stand up to that in the face of maybe an entire culture that tells you otherwise? And that is what I think you see in the life of Christ when he's sort of, clapping back at these leaders and going like, you're totally misconstruing the entire thing. And I know because I sort of wrote it. So what are y'all doing here? But what did that lead him to? Ultimately, it led him to being murdered. So like the end game of him being a just person and a just savior, if that's how you choose to believe, he was the ultimate just being, and it led him to the grave. It led him to a cross. We know the end game of that. We just celebrated Easter as Christians, and we're thankful for that. But justice doesn't mean you're going to get out of this uncomfortable position. If you're action based, I think your mindset and your perspective is actually going to get you into maybe some cultural issues if you really are trying to live out justice. So that's my thought.
I got one for you.
All right, what's up?
I often this series that we've been going through, which I give complete credit to you, my friend. really awakens a lot in me when it comes down to parenthood. And I think probably
Oh,
every
I love it.
conversation that we've had, we go back to parenthood. And it's
It's
interesting
so
because
applicable though.
it is. It is, right?
Justice with three
Uh,
different tiny people.
right,
Have fun.
right.
I can't wait for whatever you're about to say, my man.
So, my question is, how are you teaching your children about justice? Because
Mm,
I know that they are seeing things in the world. I mean, they're girls. I have girls. There's things between them that are examples of when justice is either not exemplified or demonstrated. And there are other times when maybe it is.
yeah.
How are you instilling? I would love to hear your thoughts on how are you instilling on a practical level, again, the foundation, because right now I think we're just sticking to the foundation of right and wrong and
Yeah.
how to think about something, especially when it involves other people.
Yeah. I want to respond to you and I totally will. So this isn't a cop out, but I would love to hear your thought first because I just want I like to have a balance in our voices because then I'm only hearing me in my own eardrums for a little bit. And if I don't think you're void of options because you're a good father, and I'll be honest, let me be blunt. I definitely do, but I think actually I'm curious to hear your response for two reasons, and I'll be very blunt, and
Yeah.
I'm just going to cut to the quick of it.
Yeah.
My daughters are blonde white girls living in Norway. No, and of course there's injustice.
Yeah.
That's not me underplaying it, but
Yeah.
culturally,
Yeah.
my daughters are more readily accepted.
Yes.
And your daughters are in the US, which is
Yes.
boiling over with tension and injustice. And they
Yes.
are young black girls.
Yes.
And so, I mean, truly, in the honor and respect for you and your family and the love I have for you,
Yeah.
I would love, and I totally will respond to you, man. You know
I know.
that.
I know. I know. I know.
But I would love to hear what it looks like for Fred with his little girls. And that's not buying time because you know I got
Yeah.
to
No. No.
close.
No. No. I
But
don't take it at all.
I
I
think
say
culturally your ideas might be a little more important to me than here than my own because
it.
my girls in Norway, they look Norwegian. And one of
Yeah.
them could pass as a Norwegian because she's
Yeah.
fluent.
Yeah.
So they don't get a lot of injustice here.
Yeah.
I still have to teach them, but I have to be creative to teach it.
Yeah.
I think you might be more right for example. So I'm going to kick that back to you first.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Thanks.
Um, yeah, you are getting there quickly, so might as well go there. That's
That's what
exactly
it's about, man.
that's exactly what I'm referring to, right?
That's what we're
There
doing
is,
here, dude.
yeah, there is a part of my instruction, especially in this environment, that I've had to temper, and I will give you more what I mean by that.
Mm,
Um, I think for a while, I even lived in a very disillusioned world. And I'll say probably 3 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, I would say, where I really thought we were in a better place. And by no means perfect, no means perfect. That's not what I'm saying at
mhm.
all. But just in a better place when it came down to certain racial issues, when it comes down to how people saw people. And my wife and I really did not, how do I say this? Initiate a lot of conversations that were focused at all on race.
Mm,
Very rarely would we ever use that to describe anyone. We didn't talk about cultural differences. We acknowledged when they were learning something and experiencing something different. But that
mhm.
was pretty much it. We live in a very multi ethnic, I say, area
Yeah.
ish neighborhood. So they were being exposed to a lot of things. So it felt right and good.
Mm,
But I will absolutely tell you the last 2 years that has somewhat shifted where I've become very intentional about, um, if I start first with my kids, with understanding who they are
mhm.
and focusing on how they show up in the world differently, meaning how people may perceive them. And again, you have to think about very young ages. So it's one of those things that I am constantly seeking, you know, spiritual advice or intuition to
Yeah.
know how far to go at what age. And it's more about when they bring things to us, So
Yes.
they'll say things, especially, I hate to say it, but it is what it is during the month of February because that's when everyone talks about Black history. And there's a lot of things on television. And even in January, we do a little thing with MLK and we watch his speech. And,
Hmm.
they see some of the footings, the footing and tapes and stuff for things that happen. And it's in those moments where we stop the tape and we have these conversations, trying to keep it very light because this can be heavy.
Yeah, man.
It's just, and that's not the intent. The intent is to be informed. But it talks about the injustice that was done to a generation of people, which is my kids' grandparents. Like
Yep.
it's not even like it's that far. We're not even talking about someone they can't connect with. These are my parents, my wife's parents, and some of the things that they experienced, and explaining to them that everyone isn't treated fairly. But what do you do in response to that? The question isn't always just talking about the indifferences or the injustices. It's how do I still move forward? So our focus is more on this may be true to some people, but yet this is still we believe. I think I mentioned this in a previous podcast. I have my kids saying a lot of affirmations. So one way that we are really trying to affirm who they are so that when injustice happens, it doesn't kill their spirit. It doesn't
Yes.
kill the person who we know that is in there by allowing the world to dictate to them whatever stereotype or thoughts they have towards certain people and certain
Mhm.
certain races. So it's intentional, man. It's become much more intentional. I also think because they're getting older too, the conversations are becoming a little bit more in depth, which I think is really interesting.
Mhm.
Before your kids would ask questions about what is I don't know, what is a telephone, right? I don't know. There's just something, or what is a CD player, right?
Yeah.
My kids have never seen a CD player. I remember the first time I had one on my T-shirt, and they were like, "What is that?" Right? You talk about stuff like that, and then they go, why is that person getting beat, or why is that person, not allowed in that store? What does that sign say? Does that say, whites only? Like, what does that mean? And
Yeah.
you have to explain that again, particularly around certain times of the year, and again because first quarter is a pretty heavy when it comes down from MLK to Black History Month, but
Right.
being intentional in those conversations of talking about it, whereas before it's not that I didn't want to talk about it. I just perceived in my mind before many things have happened that we were moving in a direction where my thought was 10 years from now, hopefully my children wouldn't have to deal with some of that.
Hmm.
And what has transpired in the past 2 years has completely changed my mind.
Yep.
Whereas now it's like, nope, not quite there yet. So I still need to do my part in making sure they are informed again. And it's this balance, right? Of being informed versus putting way too much on your kids at an early age when that now becomes a crippling thing.
Right.
And that's what we don't want. We want them to be informed. We want them to understand, hey, the different perspectives. Everyone doesn't see people see individuals or groups of people as equals. Even gender. Let's talk about gender for a second, right? Male and female.
Right.
Not only are they African American, black, right, but they are also females. So even
Right.
in the standpoint of being a female, there are injustices that are
Yes.
done or views or biases that people have against them before they even meet them. When they show up, there's already this preconceived notion of who they are and what they represent. And our affirmation back to them is no, I need for you to know who you are before the world tries to tell you something differently. So we're trying to be proactive, trying to balance it
Hmm.
out in a way that again does not become so depressive and oppressive that they're
Right.
constantly thinking about it, but we want them to have at least the understanding that, hey, this exists. I need for you to know it exists. And there are people who think this way. So it's,
Hmm.
and they all perceive, like this is my last comment, sorry, they all perceive it differently too, right?
Man, you
Different
never
ages.
apologize to me. This is good.
There are different ages. So it's interesting how they also process it.
Hmm.
My youngest one, I don't know, something about the youngest kid. I don't, maybe for you too. Their maturity level is by far somewhat a bit, they're a bit quicker. Let's just say it that way, right?
Man,
All my
you're about to
kids,
see it in action when you see Karina, but it's sometimes it's scary.
yes. I
Like
think it's they're
they are the
picking up on all
most.
the other ones, right?
The third one is the most socially attuned
Yes.
because they have to be. It's survival of the
Yes.
fittest, maybe a little bit. Like
Yes. Right.
she got two older banshees trying to kill her
Right.
sometimes, and so she's got to be able to read and navigate the situation. But I
Right.
think it is. I think it's a merit of where they fall in the pecking
Yeah.
order, and it is a little bit of just a natural instinct to
Yeah.
adapt
Yes.
and manipulate, or
Yeah.
not even in a bad sense,
Yeah.
just truly manipulate things for their advantage. Like it's a
Yeah.
life skill you need sometimes,
Yeah.
and they get it real
She
quick.
processes this thing quick, man. Like she's
Yeah,
all over it. Like she's the 3 or 4 questions after it. Like I just can't tell her something and she just kind of takes it. It's like, no, no, no. What does that mean? And why is that? I don't understand. Explain that. Like, and it humbles you. I don't know how. I
yeah,
think you probably feel the same way, right? On some of
yep,
these topics where it's been so long, and I'll say this for myself, either you've accepted it and learned to not focus on it, and now you're having to explain it in a way that they understand it again
yep,
without being overwhelming in emotion when it comes down
right.
to it, but in a way that they can, understand and deal with it. But it's
Well, I told
yeah,
my friend Kim, who I just hosted to close out the week for Off the Hinges on Justice, and when she was sort of sharing why she initially came on and was interested in like networking and partnering with me on different things, and she said, as a single mom who grew up with, taking care of my daughter who's 22 now, and then just growing up with a lot of this maybe injustice towards a woman in her space. She said one of the first things that you ever said in our coaching college together was that all these things that you do is for your wife and your 3 little girls. And she said, you say that on every episode. I said, yeah, because it's true. And I said, if I keep that my target audience, it keeps my heart and my message honest and pure.
yeah,
And it also, I want to communicate simply as best as I can. Not because I'm a loss for big words, but I'm also not super intelligent. But I'm not trying to drop all of this research and try to impress people. I want things to be practical,
yes,
tangible, applicable.
yes,
For who? For an 8, a 6, and an almost 3-year old. That's for
yeah,
who.
yeah,
But if you can strip it down to the level of simplicity and understanding of a child learning it for the first time, I think of a lot of us adults need to go back to the drawing board and relearn it for the first time again because we've
yeah,
been so waterlogged with BS
yeah,
and our own thoughts and emotions and
yeah,
just disgruntled grudges that we have towards the way we've had injustice play out against
absolutely.
us, which is, I get it. It's legit. I'm
Yeah,
not saying it's wrong. But if you allow that to shape and skew how you view the world and how
yes,
you live your life, that's a bad place to be at.
yes,
And I love some of the things that you said, especially with temperance. It circled back to that. But thanks, first of all, for sharing that with your girls, man. Because I know it's while while they live in a loving home with great parents, I appreciate that it's different for them.
yeah,
And I think this idea of truly having, I'm going to jump to the heart side of it, even though we're starting with the head, which is where
yeah,
it starts. But I'm going to jump to the compassion side. Like my heart goes out, not in a, oh, poor as you, woe you mindset, but my heart goes out to people that by the nature of how they were born into a certain culture, a certain space, they already have a steep, slippery uphill climb
yeah,
when other people might already be at the top of that peak. And that's true. And I'm not saying that everybody doesn't struggle because struggle is common
yeah,
to humanity. But come on, let's not be chumps. There are some people that start at a huge deficit,
absolutely.
at a huge deficit. There are Americans, regardless of skin color, who start economically as young people as a huge deficit
Yeah,
because they are told that they need to throw things on credit cards. They must go into massive debt for college. They must get a car. So they're already hook, line, and sinker with the big organizations owning them financially, and they can never start at a surplus. So I think a wise parent recognizes that and tries to set them up for better. And there are some cultures that do better setting this generational wealth mindset up for their children. So I'm challenged on that. So, but you flip maybe a monetary example like that into just general societal and cultural justices or injustices. And it's real, man.
yes,
It's real. And I love what you do with your daughters. I think for me, we want them to feel the heart of it, but I don't want my daughters to lead with their heart or their emotions.
yeah,
I want them to really think about seeing themselves first
mhm,
fully And I love how you're like, we want them to know who they are and whose they are. And we want them to really get to know their own identity before they step into a world that's going to try and sell them something cheap that's not true.
Absolutely.
Because it's all self-serving and it's pride.
Yeah.
So when you can really get them to plug into identity and get them to plug into the right headspace, I'm a firm believer simply like head, hands, heart flows into your identity, your actions, and your feelings. You need to start with having a core identity shored up really firm. And that's going to drive your actions for sure. And then that's going to cause feelings based on those actions. And then emotion intelligence can flip that around and go like, if this is the rope that I'm lending out to other people to grab onto, is that if they follow that feeling through emotional intelligence and go like, ooh, I like the way that I felt around that person. Yeah. Not that it's all about the feels, but it's important. It takes some discernment to realize, how am I communicating in this culture that is well received? Or do I care to do that? And we see politically a lot of people don't care. Yeah. I think that's ignorant, because regardless of proving a point, if you want to make a difference, you need to be culturally humble and aware, and you need to do your homework. Yeah. And then you show up in that space and you need to resonate with the emotions that matter to that person or those people. Yeah. Because if you can do that, they're going to trace that back and go like, ooh, what did they do that was so different? Right. That made me feel that way. Now they're following that line backwards and they land on your actions from the heart of it. And they go, ooh, this action, this accountability they have, man, that came from like a core identity or a good thought process. Then they can follow that trail back to just like, okay, who are you? Yeah. Like there's something different here. So whether you want to say spiritually, from a discipleship mindset, as like how we think we should be living as believers, and you watch the life of Jesus, regardless of if you're a Christian or not, if you just read the accounts of how this man met people, like the story of the Samaritan woman at a well, who was the first person he even revealed outside of his close followers that he was the Messiah, the Savior. That first interaction was someone that his people didn't talk to. And it was during a time of day where, you know, he met her at a place and in a time and space that was just really topsy-turvy, upside down from what a man that was a Jewish man should be doing. Mm-hmm. And then it sort of catches her off guard. I just really wish that I could see that, like replayed in my head. But then he starts addressing things about her that were just, they were to the point, they were truthful, but he met her with grace and with compassion, and it was just different. And that's what I see playing out, is like the way that he articulated and displayed for us how to deal with people in these ripe cultural tensions. Yeah. Was just meeting them where they're at, literally, physically where they're at, asking thoughtful questions, not trying to prove a point, but just trying to show that I care about you as a person. Yeah. And all I care about walking away from this is not that you're convinced of my way of thinking, but that you just know I care about you. Yeah. So I say that I'll circle back to your question now for our girls. I try to show them internally, because like that's the best little test bed, is with the way they treat each other. Yeah. And they'll try to pull it like, oh, Dad, I would never do that to my friend. I said, I don't believe you, because I see you doing it to your sister every day. Right. And if anyone, you should love her because she's family, and you should know her the best. So I'm not going to buy this. You're going to flip the switch and act differently, because you won't. Yeah. So I try to teach them that it's not always about feeling like you got one up on the other kid. Yeah. Or your point was made. Like, we're in this as a unit, as a family. So, if I'm giving one of the girls like congratulations on, hey, you did really well here. Yeah. Of course, they're all girls. They want to be recognized, and they will start to pipe up. And this is just a very simple example. They'll pipe in, oh, Daddy, I did this. And I immediately calmly shut them down. Yes. And I will say, Alessia, I love you, baby girl, and you do some really good things. This is not about you right now. Yes. I try to be practical and not all up in this headspace. I say, Aria or Karina or whomever, you could flip the script anyway. They did something really good. So when I recognize and praise them, you know I do it for you too. Yes. This is not your show. Yes. And they might get offended. I say, I don't care if that hurts you. Stop. Yes. Because you are not about to walk out into the world. And I give them the so what. Yes. Because if you walk around with your friends in your communities, in your school, and you always need recognition when other people are getting it, no one's going to care to be around you. Absolutely. And also, that's an injustice to that person that put in the work. Absolutely. So you need to learn your time to close your mouth. And I said, and the only time your mouth should be open right now is to also congratulate your sister. Yes. Otherwise, I don't want to hear it. Stop.
Yes.
And man, I shut it down hard
Yeah.
because I think it's the meritocracy of that is it's going to this person, not to you.
Yes.
So quit trying to steal the show. So
Yes.
it teaches some humility. It teaches some, I think it does teach them the wisdom and the temperance. So that discernment and that restraint of, I'd like an attaboy or an attagirl, but
Yeah.
it's not my space right now.
Yes.
So that is a practical way that happens a lot where
Yeah.
like, I get it. I know you're excited. You want to tell
Stage
me
of
what you
life.
did.
Yeah.
But I think those little repetitions aid the learning of, I shouldn't go seeking all the glit and the glamour and the praise.
Yes.
I should work hard. I know that when it's warranted, dad and mom will always recognize good hard work and love us
Yes.
and praise us, but also step out of the way when it's your sister's turn.
Yes. Yes.
And I think that compounded with so many variables is the heart of a lot of social injustice.
Yeah.
Because everyone wants to bang the drum, make a point, and get a pat on the back for being the smartest, sharpest, most charismatic. Everyone wants to be around you. Everyone wants to prove a point.
Yeah.
And that's cheap. It's easy. And I mean, you could argue that even we could sit here all day and do a podcast and make a lot of points. But I think we try to actually make a difference as well. But living it out with them, it looks like that. Also, on the flip side, living it out is, and we've talked about this, but I'll just cut to the chase as well. I am very deliberate to find good, close friends here in Norway that physically look different, that maybe look a little bit more like you and not as much like me.
Yeah.
And here's why. And we have some really dear friends that go to our church, and it's a really cool family, but each of them are a mix of, both of the parents are a mix of Scandinavian and West African.
Yeah.
So I think the dad's father is from Africa and mother is from Scandinavia, and then a flip so they each are from like a quarter. The kids are like a quarter of a different Scandic and West African country. I think it's like Nigeria. Like I forget all the countries, but really dear family. And I love for my girls, not just for the optic, for them to get comfortable being around different people, but also because truly it is so culturally rich.
Yeah.
What they can learn from these people that just come from literally different parts of the globe.
Yes.
So then they have an appreciation to fully understand. And Arya does. She'll come home and, oh, Dad, did you know that there was a huge earthquake in Turkey? And she knows to call it Turkey and not just Turkey.
Right.
Little nuances that she's becoming so culturally intelligent and humble.
Yes.
That I'm blown away at her 8-year-old brilliance.
Yes.
But I'm also thankful because I've been intentional with Laura to put her there.
Yes.
And to tell her, you need to be quick to listen to other people and curious to learn about them.
Yes.
And they do. So I think practically for my daughters, the way I teach justice is I shut it down when they try and step in someone else's gap.
Yeah.
But I also put them and inculcate in them a space where they have to be around a lot of different people.
Yeah.
And I tell them, like, we want friends that look different than us because it's just how God made us.
Absolutely.
And it's why would I want a canvas that's painted with the same color? It would just look like the same canvas. Like the accents, the flavors. I don't like personally, man. And again, maybe people are going to shoot me like this over the same way that you just said, the Bible's a framework, right? So whatever, come firing away. I don't really care. This is just me being honest. I don't like the whole colorblind mindset. Like, why would I be colorblind, and how would that help me appreciate an actual beautiful painting or a sunset? Like, I love it's incredibly insulting. And I don't even think people that try to justify it with like, well, the heart it came from, like, I think it was an ignorant heart that it came from. Because it's like, maybe you meant good, but clearly you didn't have any friends that would have been insulted by that. Because that's just all sorts of wrong, man. So I think to see people fully, as a parent, we have such a beautiful gift that we can start at the start.
Yeah.
And we don't have to try and change an adult's mind. We can start, and we have such an opportunity. So parents, like, please hear me. It's hard. It takes a lot of deliberate, like, looking for something that's different and being comfortable with something that's different. But your kids deserve and demand that. And I think your job as a parent demands that you put them into that space and don't helicopter parent them. Like, take the hands off a little bit. Give them the space to ask clunky, awkward questions because they're curious kids. Like,
Right.
asking a little black girl why it's hard to brush her hair.
Right.
Man, when you're a dad listening to that, you're like, ooh, that sounds like uncomfortable. Like I don't feel comfy with that because I wouldn't ask her that. Yeah, but you're not a 6-year-old little girl, so let her
Right.
ask the question.
Right. Right.
Let
Right.
the little girl ask the young black girl
Yes.
what's different about hygiene because it's different,
Yes.
man. And it's just, but we're so scared that they're going to mess it up when they're free to mess it up that they grow up and they mess everything up.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think that's where we try to teach justices practically by being culturally humble, culturally observant, and seeing themselves first and then all others
Yeah.
fully,
Yeah.
exactly the way God made them,
Yeah.
not the way you hope they are,
Yeah.
exactly the way they are.
Yeah.
And I think when you can teach that to a child, the object lesson for yourself becomes really clear too. Because
Yes. Yes. That part.
I learn
Yes.
so much. And I want to kick it back over to you now because like as we transition maybe into some of like the actions that we can be taking, like what does that look like for you and what are you learning as you
Ooh.
watch this journey with your daughters, man? Because I'm sure it's rich.
Ooh. You know what? So I'm gonna say two things. I love what you said to
And thanks for
summarize.
that question, by the way. That's a
Ah,
great question. We
no worries.
we go into the trenches, man. I'm not pussyfooting around with this because it's the reality of our
Absolutely.
lives.
Absolutely. Right. So when you were saying, what you do with the girls, it really made me think about intentionality creates sensitivity. And
Mm,
that's what I want from my girls as well. I
yes.
want you to feel the sensitivity around differences, to acknowledge it, but also to respect it and to be accepting of it when it's appropriate. I'm going to also add that disclaimer in there when it's
And to be
appropriate.
okay
Right, right.
being different in that
Yes.
space where you
Right,
don't
right,
fit.
right. Because I'm not talking about, again, I was very clear with young kids. I'm not talking about, again, just race and gender. When we're
Right.
talking about differences, meaning some people may choose to steal, some people choose not to steal, right? So there are things in our household that we choose that I'm saying, again, we're specifically referring to kids. So I'm saying there are absolutely things I want my kids to be accepting of and to be
Right.
okay with, right? Versus there are some things that no, these are things that we don't do. But I will say this too, something else that you said that that triggered for me, and I didn't even think about this when I was explaining earlier. Something that I started at the beginning of the school year
Mm-hmm.
is having my girls every day when I pick them up. Well, the days that I pick them up, wife and I go back and forth.
Yep.
The first thing that I ask them is, how did they show God's love?
Mm,
That's the first question they get from me, and they already know it. First thing Daddy's going to say, I'm going to say hi, but the next question is, how do you show God's love? And
I like
here's the
that.
thing. We're at a point now that I'm okay with them saying, hey, Daddy, I didn't do anything today that showed God's love, because that's truth and honesty. And I want that,
Yep.
right? Don't make up something. But I want you to be sensitive around making sure that you are showing God's love in your actions. So back to your question, the whole thing, it's interesting. Even me having my kids say that every day, brother, I am now thinking about for myself, what did I do? Because I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about justice. And again, as I lead, not only my professional life, but also in my family. Um, but what did I do in action? Like I thought about the thing. I knew it was the right thing. Did I speak up for that person? I love what you said about, um, you said more than just accolades and congratulations, but when you are acknowledging that someone has done something good, like how many times, and I'll speak for myself because you put it back on me, you've seen someone do something great, or I like my wife. This is something Donnie does this all the time. If she sees another female that's dressed really nicely, my wife is
Mm-hmm.
going to stop that female and say, "You look beautiful."
Man, that's
And it's
awesome.
the simple things like that around acknowledging someone else's either value, worth, what they're doing is great. Like that's all a part of justice. It's fair. There's a fairness in that that makes that person feel good, makes that person feel accepted, whatever it might
Right.
be, right?
That is doing
Um,
justice.
right, right. And so it's an action. It's not just in thinking it, oh, that was a nice thing to do. No,
And
what did you do?
it doesn't have to be a big showstopper.
Yeah, no,
You're
no,
giving
no.
justice to the work they put into their appearance.
Yes.
Like,
Something so simple. It's the
yeah.
little things, little things.
Yeah.
Um, I almost don't want to share this, but I'll share it because hopefully no one will pick up on this. But um, Something that I have started doing also that I really enjoy, secretly. We don't go out to eat a lot,
Hmm.
but I remember a time in my life, I think I mentioned this on one of the other podcasts. I went through my own financial struggles very,
Right.
very early in life. And so when I do get to take my family out to eat, it is such a it's a pleasure and an honor. It's much deeper than what my kids see it because for them, we've done it. We go to nice restaurants, we do nice things. But something that I also do is I always pick one family and I secretly pay for their meal. And
Man.
I tell the waitress, never, ever, 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 ever tell that I did it because I don't want, it's not that. It's just, I understand what it's like when I see big families and sometimes you didn't, and it couldn't even, it's not necessarily always that I think the family is struggling, but it's just showing some sense of appreciation for other people, showing that it's not just about me and my family when we get to have
Hmm.
experiences, but just to lighten someone else's day to make them just think, hey, I'm doing the right thing. It could have taken that mom and dad, who knows what, to get their kids out to the meal, to get them settled, to get, it's a lot. I remember what that used to feel like. My kids are a little bit older now, so we don't deal with
Hmm.
that as much. But the
Right.
restlessness and you just wanting some time to yourselves, you want to get out of your environment, like it's a lot. And, just being able to do that, it feels good for me, but it also is my way of also trying to spread justice in a sense of just, hey, I want to respect you and what you do
Hmm.
and acknowledge it and it be okay that it's not about me, but it's about another person. So
Yeah.
again, I try to be intentional about what I do and what we do, and also don't allow it to just be a thought. And I think
Right.
that's where a lot of people get caught. Even speaking
Yeah.
up, let's go the other side, right? And those things that I talked about a little bit are the more nicer things. But
Right.
what about when you see someone who is mistreating someone? And this is a big one. Um,
Hmm.
People love to share their thoughts and opinions on other people, and many people refer to it as gossip. That is not my favorite thing. And if I feel like someone's doing it with the wrong intent, again, to me, justice is saying, hey, I don't appreciate, how you are, giving your opinion on this person in a way that potentially could, and especially in corporate America, words matter. It's just people have been, I won't say blacklisted, but many people have lost credit as well as their brand has been tarnished from people misplacing words. And that happens
Hmm.
often, and it should not happen often. But there should be enough people that when someone is saying something about someone, especially when we know it's not true,
Yeah.
that we should speak up. We
Yep.
should speak up and we should say something. So
You want to know a fun? You want to know a fun way I've handled that before?
let's
I've done
go.
this before, man. Because people are people. They do
Yeah.
the same thing everywhere.
People be
When
people.
I People be peopling, they sure do. And I genuinely don't like that either. I get really frustrated. And this isn't trying to sound all highfalutin or
Yeah.
wholesome. Now it's just it's come through a life. It's not that it's easy. It is
Yeah.
easy to complain and gossip.
Yes.
I have I have forged in myself an actual like detest and disdain for that.
Yeah.
I can't stand it.
Yeah.
Can't stand it because I've seen how harmful it is. So on more than one occasion when I've seen that, especially in like, let's just say in a job setting, I do, again, I do this with my little girls. And they don't really gossip much because they know it's not tolerated, but if they start complaining about someone else without them there, I've said, cool, why don't we put a pin in that? Let's go get them so that they can have a voice in this complaint too. Maybe they want to complain about themselves with us. And I try to make it lighthearted. They're like, no, I'm like, well, then why are we doing it?
That's good.
Oh, I would say this to their face. And that's usually the comeback for like, it's okay. I'm not gossiping. I'd say it to them.
Yeah.
Good. I'm going to give you the opportunity. Let's go call them in.
Yeah.
And then it shuts it down. Good. Then shut up.
Yes.
Stop. Like
Yes.
I'm not going to tolerate it. So
Yes.
either you do it with them
Right.
present so
Right.
that we can like rip the scab and get nasty and like figure it out so it can heal, or we don't add the
Not
insult
do
to
it.
the injury. We
Yeah.
just don't.
Yeah.
And you're right. It's such a caustic thing, man.
Yeah.
Um, I'm gonna be cognizant of our time because I want to transition into
Yeah.
something that I'm gonna share something with the listeners, and then you can sort of marinate on this in the background and give me your thoughts. But I really like how uh, when you look through the different character strengths and the VA character strengths, I run that assessment with some people when we do coaching together. But it associates different strengths to this virtue of justice, and it's teamwork, fairness, and leadership. And I like this balancing act. And he does a really good job, the researcher that published this, on showing an overuse and underuse and a balance of these different strengths and virtues. So I'm just going to read really quickly the three. I will read in order: teamwork, fairness, leadership, sort of what it is and what it's not. And then I'm going to give you a thought that I just had on leadership. And I try to put a lot of thought and just being sort of reflective and meditating on this topic, especially after I talked about it with Kim. Because when you and I chop these things up, like, I can hold guests and I don't even have to hold their opinion. I agree with everything Kim said, but I just want to give people a space to share their voice. But when you and I go after this, it's about application, man. Like, we're getting back to good. We're doing good. We're doing justice. We're not just, philosophizing about it. Like, what is it like? So listen to these. So teamwork, which is one of these facets within it, it's collaborative. It's not dependent on one end or selfish on the other. It's simple, but just find that balance for yourself. Fairness. It's actually about equal opportunity, not favoritism or detachment. And I think that's healthy. Like, maybe it's easier to just step out of this challenge for fairness by detaching yourself from the situation. Well, that's not just. Turning a blind eye, avoiding it altogether doesn't make it go away and isn't practicing and doing justice. And I see a lot of that these days globally with people.
Yeah.
Leadership. It's a positive influence. It's not control on one end. And again, on the other end, it's not passivity. And this is where I want to lead this thought, and just kick it over to you for your thoughts on how we tether these actions and this accountability framework into our conviction and our compassion. And I'm going to land on that last thing as a leader, because in any space in life, I really believe we lead, even if people are leading themselves. It sounds cliche, but it's true, because the character that you're forging, even by yourself as a young man, woman, or child, if you learn to lead that identity like you try to teach to your kids, that will be the outcropping of your actions. And something you said a little bit ago, I loved it. The repetitions you're doing with your daughters on what you ask them, the things that you bring into the topic of daily conversation, that repetition aids a healthy learning. And man, when you put that and plant that seed into their heart, that is biblical. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. And as a man thinks in his heart, or woman, when you said man back in those, again, culturally, don't get offended. That's just, mankind was talking about humanity. But let's just say, as a person thinks in their heart, so are they. So is he. So the way that you think and reflect and focus your identity, that will be how you act, because it's your default button, because instinctually your mind drives your body's actions. So as a leader, just listen to this and give me your thoughts. I think for me, the highlight takeaway for this, right? Real leadership doesn't demand justice for itself, but it will always defend it for others. And just sit with that for a minute and think about that, because I can reflect on the moments where I've tried to do things well as a father and as a husband. It's sacrificial. Yeah. It's not demanding it for oneself, but it is swiftly and holistically stepping into that gap to do justice on the behalf of others.
Yes.
That is what doing justice looks like to me. And that's how you lead a just life.
Yeah.
Not clamoring about, I should have gotten this, I should have gotten that. And I'm not saying that there aren't injustices that shouldn't be addressed. Don't mishear me. But leadership, when you have other people around you in any setting and you are called to lead them, I really believe that it's not about you making your point of what you should have had given your way, but you're really quick to sniff it out and find balance and harmony with the larger group and the larger team, or within the family. And that resonates probably most deeply with me as a husband and father. It's not about, oh, well, I shouldn't have had to do the dishes, or our children don't see that with us either. Like, I love Laura, and I told her this numerous times this week. I said, I love how you just step in the gap with me so seamlessly. And we don't have a list of things we do and don't do. We get the things done together, because it models to our girls. We just help each other, and we flow in and out of different tasks, and we rotate, and whatever works the best is what works, and we're happy to do it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, how does that sit with you?
I mean, leadership cost.
Mm,
I have yet to understand. I wish someone would have really explained to me what leadership really was. Because I think there's this perception of not just the glamour, but it people think it's a power thing. And that is the least of what it is. True leadership,
yep.
there is a constant sacrificing of your time, your priority, your comfort for the sake of those who are following, whoever they are. I don't think it changes from when I'm leading at work to your point when I'm leading with my family. There are things about being in a leadership position that absolutely require you not to be selfish.
Hmm.
And it forces you to have to put the needs of those who have entrusted you in that position to operate as a covering. And oftentimes that means having to do difficult and hard things. And most of the time, it's in communication. Here's another one too, right? Even when correcting the actions of the people you are leading,
Hmm.
that's difficult. It's not just telling people they did it wrong. No, no, no. You have to make sure you're dealing with the person, make sure that you're building the person up, that you're creating a safe place for, like, that takes work to have to think through that in order to make sure you get to the right outcome. I think we mentioned this at the top of the hour. This is about bringing people back to a level of dignity.
Yeah.
So if you're leading someone that has fallen or is not doing what you expected, your kids are not abiding, those on your team are not, focused or doing what has been asked of them, you have to correct. As a leader, you have to correct, but you have to do it in a way that is fair and just.
Hmm.
And that's the part that's not easy. When you do it the right way, it is
Right.
very easy just to scold someone, just to say whatever. Again, like you said earlier, not to be led by your emotions and feelings. It has nothing to do with emotions and feelings. And most of the time, when you are leading, I've told many people this, stick to the facts. Remove the emotion and stick to the facts.
Facts are your friend, my
Yes.
friend.
I'm telling you, they keep you safe. They will
Yeah.
keep you safe. So anytime I think about leadership, man, I have thankfully been in a position of, and when I say intentional leadership, past 15 years, that I have literally had someone that I've been responsible for, either work wise or family wise. And it can be heavy. I don't, again, it's not a negative thing and I own it.
Right.
I'm glad that I was built for it. Here's the
Hmm.
part that I know I'm not doing it on my own, depending on what you believe, and you know what I'm talking about. But
Right.
it's a heavy mantle that we have to wear as leaders of families, of teams, of groups, whatever it might be, because of the responsibility we have to care for the people in the midst of also developing them.
Right. I
And
know, man.
that's there's a lot of justice that has to happen in that,
There
in
is.
a way that you maintain people's um dignity and their value, but also correction never is easy.
Yeah.
It's going to sting a little bit, right? So there's an action. We started from the head to the hands, now to the heart, right? There absolutely in your mind, first and foremost, what's right and wrong. Okay, how am I now going to address this with this person as a leader? Because I have to say something. I cannot let it just pass. But
Right.
also I have to think about the heart too, making sure that I'm doing it in a delicate way that does not crush the person.
Right.
And all of that takes skill. For me, it takes spirituality, right? It takes some sense of connection that I am listening to what I consider
Yep.
my source, God, to know what I'm saying, what I'm doing is not from
Right.
my own bias. That's another thing you got to make sure you filter out,
Man,
that you're not
that's a
just
that's a
looking at,
that's a dumpster fire right there. There's so many we could go off on that. Just
right? So
endless. Yeah.
It's heavy, man. Sorry, it's
Not your bias. I mean, yours might be a dumpster fire too. I'm speaking for myself. Everybody's generally speaking. We're about to land the plane on this, but I just want to leave a couple questions and thoughts. I think very simply, practically what I pull away from this, and man, this has been good. We could go on and on, but
yes,
for me, practically a reflection is justice begins at home. For me, and how I parent, how I speak to my wife, how I lead my children, and how I serve and move beyond service into sacrifice. Unseen. I don't need you to accolade me for it.
Yeah.
So it begins at home. How I parent, how I serve as a husband, and how I sacrifice myself without it ever even being seen. Yeah. And nobody else even needs to know. When I can practice that discipline, when I'm disciplined in that, I will start to have a deeper appreciation for the merit of justice.
Yeah.
And I think to ask ourselves, like, where do my actions fall short of what my words claim to value? Where's that disconnect, that say-do gap, if you will, whatever you want to call it? Where is that not synchronized and harmonized well? And then for me, this is where it boils down, because I always say this is for my wife and girls. And for the two of us, this is for our 8 girls. It sounds like we just are barely staying afloat in a sea of estrogen right now. Josh and Fred just doing it with all these women around us. But do I live in a way where the women in my life, and that ain't some floozy comment, I'm talking like my wife and daughters, and that's it, full stop, where they see fairness, accountability, and humble sacrifice in everything that I think and say and do? And am I willing to give a voice to the voiceless? Am I willing to take joy in honoring those who are too scared or humble or oppressed or smushed down and squashed down to even have a voice for themselves? Can I take joy in honoring those people who are less than? The fatherless, the widows, the different, the ugly, the maimed, the handicapped. You pick your thing. Anything that makes you feel like it gives you a little shiver up your spine when you see them. Am I cool with sacrificing myself to make them known? And if you can do that, I think you might be on a good path to doing justice. Last word over to you, my man, and then we're going to dial it off.
No, man, you close it out. That's it. I mean, again, thinking about the other person, thinking about what you would want, just start there. Again, I know we have all different variations in what we deem as right and wrong, but just making sure, think about someone else when you're thinking about how you're treating people, but also how do you speak up, as you said so eloquently, to defend those who may not have the voice or the ability or the means to do it. Right. To me, it's all a part of that. So,
yeah. All right. Love you, my man. Appreciate it.
You, brother.
Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.
Get back to good. Go practice some justice. We out. Thanks for tuning into this episode of Back to Good. Don't forget to follow Foundational Coaching on your favorite social media platforms. Fred and I are honored to be a part of your story today. We hope this conversation has helped bring your head, hands, and heart back to good.